Hey everybody, Barry Johns here, and welcome back to yet another edition of Studio Talk. Today's just kind of a catch up on what I've been going through. I spent the last 3 days, and yes, it took me 3 days, and I'm talking about all day, rewiring this studio back here. I got a new piece of gear I'm going to talk about in a second that kind of motivated me to rethink things. I had a couple of Apache AD and DA16s from back in the day that I used to route all of my hardware in and out of, as well as I think if you've watched me before, you know I've been on Pro Tools HD Native, and I also use an Omni with that, which is a 6-in, 8-out, something like that, interface. And so all of my I/O and everything was going through the Alesis units. And so ultimately I was scaling back down to just a single 8 I/O. And I kind of went back and forth between what I ended up buying and what I was considering. Jury's still out on it at the end of the day. It's taken me a little bit to get it all worked out and everything, but ultimately I had to rewire this whole studio. I think I pulled, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 11 DB25 snakes. So that's a DB25 connector to either 8XLR female or 8XLR male to get that all wired up. I was able to eliminate 3 of those because I'm no longer using my D command to monitor through. I'm using my new interface to do that with because it has great monitoring options with it. And that alone took up 3 DB25 snakes just for 3 sets of stereo I/O. That was a little bit overkill, but that it's designed to be able to use for surround sound and everything. So then I had to rewire my Patchbay and redo all of that. If you're not familiar with Patchbays, I just put out a video recently on understanding the basic principles of a Patchbay. I encourage you to go out and watch that. At some point in the future, I'm going to go into great depth about how I wired the Patchbay and why I wired it the way that I wired it to give me all kinds of additional options, a lot maybe some of you have never thought of. But it gives me a tremendous amount of flexibility. You know, simple things like if I want to be able to record my computer audio straight into Pro Tools to do something with that, I can just patch that in and do that with it. So anyway, this is, I got to watch the microphone here. This bad boy right here is my DB25 spreadsheet at the end of the day. I did this in Excel. I haven't done the Redco yet. I'm going to be doing that probably. I'm not in a huge hurry to do that, but I'm going to be doing that here pretty soon. But you can see up here where I've got the Switchcraft 6425 all wired in and everything. And of course, you know, you got to go one by one and check every single connection, make sure it's right, make sure there's no issues, no XLR connectors on the back end were a little bit mixed up or whatever. So I had to do that. So I'm going to show you some pictures right now about what it looked like when I was pulling this thing apart. And, you know, you can see all the cables strung out all over the D command back there, as well as out from behind the, excuse me, out from behind the racks and everything. You know, now I'm going to kind of show you about where the cabling and how I did the cabling coming out of the racks, and that's so much cleaner. What happens, as most of us do, is we start adding things over time, and instead of really addressing how all that's wired and cable tied and everything, we just keep dropping the additional cables on cables, and I had a complete mess back behind the racks. I mean, it was just a mess. And if I ever needed to get back there, I'd step on things, pull them out, just a complete mess. So now that I've got everything dialed in the way I know I want it, that's pretty easy. I can just pull those racks out and walk right back there, no problem. Also in the desk back there, I'll try and get some camera footage of that. I've got a GoPro I'll probably take back over there just so you can see it. But all the wiring and everything, you know, when you see here, let me get out of here. When you see the top of the desk back there, okay, those all lift up, all right? And so you can access the belly of the beast, per se. So all of the cabling, everything is coming out of the rack over here, out of the rack back. I'll get my fingers right. I'm trying to do a weatherman thing. Out of that rack over there, and then back over here, I've actually got a BAE lunchbox that I actually used a router and routed out that section and had a custom thing made for it to mount those in there. I've also got one in my rack over here I plan to put over there as well. But anyway, all the cables and everything are buried and all of that back over there. You can still see I've got remnants like over here as an example. Okay. Over there. I'm backwards because if you don't know what I'm doing, I'm looking into a monitor watching my finger like a weatherman would. But, you know, I still got my utility knife and screwdrivers and all kinds of things like that. And so ultimately I was able to get all of that buried deep into the kind of the belly of it. So where before, when you really can't see down there, but if you were to look down below, there were wires and cables for days. For days. And of course, you never see that in camera or anything like that because that's kind of below the knees. But anyway, I really got it all cleaned out, and I hate to break it to you, all you young boys and girls out there. This would have been much easier for you than it was me. You know, I'm in my mid 50s, and let me tell you, I'm on my back crawling underneath that thing 30, 40 times. I'm having to crawl up and get behind it on my knees, every which way but Sunday on that thing, and I am sore. But that's the price we pay to get ourselves organized and get ourselves hopefully towards a clutter-free studio. So kind of wanted to update you on what's kind of going on in the studio, what I've been doing for the last couple of days. Again, as you can see here, you know, at some point I'll actually pull that up on the screen where you can see a little bit clearer. I take it, you know, I just did an Excel or whatever. I still have to label the front of the Patchbay, but that's easy to do. And so right now this is kind of my roadmap and everything, but you can see how many times I've grabbed it, I've stepped on it, I've kneeled down on it, I've done everything else you could imagine to get it all wired. So you're probably asking, what is that piece of hardware that you got motivated to do that with? Well, like I told you before, I've been on, I have a long history with Pro Tools. I know a lot of you guys hate it, whatever. I like Pro Tools. I just hate Avid, but I like Pro Tools, and I feel very comfortable with it. And it's like, you know, it's just like an extension of my brain and my hands and everything. It's just my head's wrapped around it. I'm good to go with it. But I can certainly understand why, if you're using another DAW out there, why you like that. I completely get that argument. But I started out on Pro Tools back in the 90s, okay? I originally went with a Digi 001. Wow, I'm going way, way back. And then later on, I found out this deal where I could actually buy this is when they came out with Pro Tools HD, the TDM cards that kind of dominated for a very long time before HDX came out. And I quickly connected the dots and realized, hey, if I buy a bunch of used mix cards, which is pre-TDM, if I buy a bunch of used those and have them registered in my name, then I can upgrade to Pro Tools HD for incredibly cheap, next to nothing, and then I can turn those systems around. And so I was selling $10,000 and $15,000 Pro Tools systems right and left. I probably sold about 20 of them and made an average of about $1,000 to $1,500 off every single one of them. And so I did quite well with that. And of course, I ended up with my own HD3 system with a couple 192s and a sync, and it didn't cost me a penny. And it didn't cost me a penny. Selling those mixed core cards, I was able to get that. Otherwise, I couldn't afford it. You know, the system I had for a long time, you know, back then was just unrealistic for somebody like me in a home studio or whatever. But anyway, back then I got the benefit of having all that, and I used it and I loved it, and I used it for, well, really up until about 8 years ago, probably about 8 years ago, I guess. That's when I made the switch over to HD Native. And so up until this point, I've been on Pro Tools HD Native with Pro Tools Ultimate. And so I'm selling the Omni. I pulled the Omni out. Like I said, I already sold my Apogee AD16 and DA16Xs. I already sold those on Reverb. Hopefully that guy's really happy with those right now. And so I'm putting that up for sale. I'm also putting up my 12-core Mac Pro. That's going up for sale. And as well as like the version of Pro Tools Ultimate that I have. And so if you're saying, well, Barry, why are you going to sell your version of Pro Tools Ultimate? Well, I'm here to tell you, I bought a Carbon. I did. When I'd been looking at the Carbon for a long time. And, you know, I've got a couple of videos out on that, comparing it to Universal Audio from a DSP to DSP. I'm going to tell you I never really gave Universal Audio a serious consideration because I've been down that road a couple of times. And that's a money pit. It's a huge money pit for somebody like me who just feels the need to buy the next and buy the next. And I realized that quickly, and I decided to get out of it because, that you can't do a lot with those DSP cards. They really need to update those again. But for your average home Project Studio user, they're more than fine. I'm not bashing it at all. They make some of the best plugins you can buy, and their interfaces today are actually good interfaces. The first version that came out, the AD was pretty good, but the DA was not so good. That's pretty well documented. But their conversion day is really good. But I didn't want to go back into that rabbit hole because I already have so many plugins, and I just didn't, quite frankly, need them. Even as good as they are, I just didn't feel like I needed them. The one piece that I was looking at very, very, very hard, and I'm still kind of iffy, did I make the right decision here? Because that particular piece of I/O has so much potential future proofing and power. It's some of the things you guys probably don't actually talk about much, but it's the Focusrite 16 line. And that has 16 analog in and out at line level. There are no mic preamp. Well, I think there's 2 mic preamps built into it, but most of it's line. So it's actually, I think, 18 in and 16 out or something like that. But what's really, in the conversion on it is top notch, just really, really good, really strong reputation, but some of the advantages to that is it actually has Thunderbolt 3 built into it. It has connectors for DigiLink connectors to use with Pro Tools HDX or HD Native. You could use it with OTDM if you wanted to with an adapter cable. And it has SPDIF in and out, which the Carbon doesn't have, and I'm not happy about that. It also has another 16 channels of light pipe via ADAT in and out on it, as well as this Dante. And Dante is super powerful. I am considering at some point, and that's why that was compelling. So we'll see how long I hang on to Carbon depending on that. But I've got a detached garage. In a couple of years, all my kids will be gone. My wife and I had 3 additional kids, total of 5, but 3 other kids after I turned 40. So I got 2 more years with the twins that are about ready to turn 16 next month. And so I think I'm going to convert that garage into a tracking room. And that's where something like Dante gets very powerful. Right now, and if you didn't realize that, you can just run a lot of channels over a single Cat6, network cable, and I could easily just run that throughout the backyard, go around my pool out back, go underground with it and run it out over there. And then I could put my Dante mic preamps there and be able to control everything from in here. And then I would just do wireless cameras, or not wired, but I'd do wired cameras back and forth to be able to communicate and everything. But so that's something I'm considering doing in a couple of years, but that's at least a couple of years away. I'm going to deck that thing out. Ultimately, later on, if I sell the house, I'll turn it into a mother-in-law apartment, which is really popular down here in Central Florida. So I'll wire it up that whole way and get it set up where if we move or whatever, it's an easy conversion over to do that. So anyway, that's something in the plans later on. That's why the Focusrite was so compelling to me, because Dante is so powerful. Your average home user doesn't really have much of a need for Dante. But for other things, without having to run long, traditional analog snakes that take up a lot of real estate and they're super long runs, that does not get me excited at all. But you have AVB, which is the alternative to Dante over on Pro Tools Carbon. Some of the other manufacturers out there, like Motu, uses AVB. So it's a very similar type technology as Dante, gives you the same type of options associated with it. But for right now, and I'm trying to understand this, right now, Avid being Avid, which is why I hate Avid, but right now they haven't fully opened up the protocol of AVB on Carbon. And so right now it's proprietary. So my guess is they're probably going to come out with some additional I/O, additional mic preamps, to be able to expand that system and try and keep it all in-house like only Avid does. But that's my guess with that. But anyway, this bad boy is going to get me through a couple of years. I think with the advent of the new Apple M1 processors, M1X around the corner in the fall, M2 probably next year. By that time, these computers are going to be so ridiculously powerful, you really just won't believe it. And so I've got this set up with an M1 MacBook Air. Okay. It only has 8 GB of RAM, and it's still a lot more powerful than my 12 core. So I'm going to be using that until they release the M1X, of which they're supposed to come out with a Mac Mini Pro this fall. And then I'll buy that and then give that laptop to my son for college, which has always been the plan. So anyway, I've got that kind of going right now with Carbon. So that's why I rewired the studio. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm going to be doing some videos coming up talking about my experiences, some of the roadblocks that I ran into, and then, of course, figured out how to get past them, try to make that easier for other people considering Carbon. I know a lot of people say you don't need DSP, zero latency is not an issue. All I've got to tell you is if you've worked on a zero latency system, I'm sorry, I don't care. Your 32 buffer is still not going to cut it. It's a different thing, and you can't know until you experience it. And I know every time I say that, I get a lot of grief from guys in their studio bedrooms and their studio rooms at home saying, no, I can do this, I can do that with my I/O. And yes, some of them have the additional third-party GUI you can put up in front. I don't want to turn this back and forth into one versus the other, but when you get used to that, that's one of the things that I miss somewhat with HD Native, although HD Native is incredibly low latency. But I do miss that from my TDM days, and it does make a difference. And so it does to me. And so I'm talking about me. If it doesn't to you, that's fine. Don't worry about it at the end of the day. But anyway, that's the route that I took. So like I said before, all the other stuff's going up for sale on Reverb. And yes, I no longer, I can sell my current version of Pro Tools Ultimate because with Carbon, it came with a free version of Pro Tools Ultimate. And so, that's another year I don't have to pay to keep it up to date, and probably make another video about that at some point. But anyway, that's where I'm at, and that's kind of my logic and my reasoning. So I'm beat, I'm wore out, my back is sore, my neck is sore, my knees are sore. Daggone it, crawling up and underneath that desk 1,000 times, literally what felt like 1,000 times, has got me wore out, and I got to go to work early in the morning. So we're going to let this go at this point. So anyway, if you like the content I put out there, please do me a favor, hit that like, subscribe, that notification bell. It really does help me. The vast majority of my videos are watched by non-subscribers, although my subscriber base has grown incredibly quickly, considering I've only been at this about 45 days as far as this channel is concerned. And so I guess I must be on the right track doing a few things, right? Because a lot of you seem to like what I'm putting out there. Not everybody, and I understand not everything I put out there is for everybody. And I'm just giving my opinion. Sometimes I play devil's advocate on things and give different perspectives and give you something to think about, kind of the way you would if you're in an online forum going back and forth. I'm not always right, okay? I'm just, I make decisions for me and I share them with you. You can either adopt them, or you could say that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'll move on, and maybe the next video will make me happier. I don't know, whatever it is. But anyway, thank you for watching. I really, really, really appreciate it. I really do. And I hope all of you have a great day.